Everyone, this is Lori McIntosh with Coldwell Banker, and I am obviously on Zoom today with Paul Lundberg, who's a local here in Auburn, and he's a consultant. And I got to hear him speak a couple of weeks ago. Super intrigued by what he does for a living, and wanted to share what I learned with you, and just learn a little bit more about Paul. So let's start off with your business. Tell me about it before we dive deeper into your past, what you do now.
Great. Thanks, Laura. I appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words. So I have been in education for 30 years, and I wanted to do something on my own where I began to do some consulting with schools and specifically with administrative leaders. And so last year I started Paul Lundberg Consulting, which isn't all that original, but I basically what I do is I work with a few different companies. Probably the company I work with the most is a company called Learning for Living, which is based out of North Carolina. And they do several different things, but what I do with them are three consulting elements. One is I go into schools or into districts and I do workshops, 4-hour workshops, essentially getting people to understand how important it is to cultivate a culture. We sort of really believe that culture can, by design, be amazing, but if you allow it to happen sort of by circumstance, you can kind of be drained by it. And so one of the things I do is work with schools to create really thriving cultures that are based on relationships and trust and engagement. So that's one element. The other thing I do is I work with administrators, and I do two phases. One is I can work with teams where I work with an administrative team to help to create great cultures in their organization. And I also coach administrators, and often I do that one-on-one. And then the last element that I do is retreats. So we do these 4-day intensive retreats where we work with leaders from all over North America, and do these 4-day retreats where we get them to begin to understand their why, get to reflect on their why and what it is that's really important to them, to begin to learn skills on how to build relationships within their organizations, and then to cultivate, a higher level of trust, and finally then to infuse what we call a people first mindset, where anything you're doing, you got to think about your people first, and how is this going to impact your people, not just your customers, not just your bottom line, not just your data, but how does it impact the people in your organization? And often what I have found is that leaders, not only in education, but across the corporate world, have never really been exposed to learning how to be leaders and not just managers.
Yeah, so maybe the current MBA program I'm sure it's really evolved from when I went to college back in the late 80s.
Yeah, sure.
It was very different back then. So that's really interesting and very unique for someone with your background, just being a principal, being an administrator yourself, right? And then a coach, and evolving to this point of where you are. What got you here to open Paul Lundberg Consulting?
Yeah. Over the last 10 years, I have spoke at different conferences. I have led some workshops, not just with leaders and teachers, but also with students. And I've done that on the side, sometimes during the school year, and other times during the summer. And I kind of had a calling for that, and was starting to get some interest from people in the private sector that said, "Hey, we'd love to utilize your skill set to help our organizations." So my last principalship was at Colfax High School, and I had spent 8 years there, and it was 8 of my fondest years in the profession. I just absolutely loved the students there. The staff was the most amazing staff, and the community is just an amazing community as well. But I felt like they were ready for new blood, and I was sort of ready to look at the last phase of my career and do some of this work.
Okay. And how did you end up in Colfax? So your dad is Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
He is retired now, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he's in my Rotary Club in Auburn. And I haven't talked to him a whole lot, so I don't know a lot about Bruce yet. I know I will at some point. But you were born in Placer County, right?
I was actually born in St. Paul, Minnesota. However,
Okay, let's go to
I
that.
moved to Auburn when I was 9, and I
All
was
right.
raised there. Yeah.
How did you get to Auburn from Minnesota?
Well, my father's a Lutheran pastor, and so we moved around a little bit when we were young. He was doing seminary work in Minnesota, but I do have a lot of family that lives in Minnesota as well. And then he took a, a church up in Auburn, Bethlehem Lutheran, and thankfully I got to spend my formative years in an amazing community. I graduated from Rock Creek. I was a road runner, then a Wildcat at E.B. Kane, and then finally a Hillman at Placer. And yeah, those have been amazing years for me, and I love the Auburn community. I actually my parents still live in the same home that I was raised in, but
Wow.
I live up in Grass Valley. However, I've always worked, with one exception. I've always worked for the Placer Union High School District. So I worked at Placer High School at the beginning of my career, and then at Del Oro High School for 18 years, and then at Colfax for the last 8 years.
Okay. And so you live in Grass Valley, and I'm assuming closer to Highway 80 since you're close to Colfax, like
I'm about
174 area.
20 minutes away.
Okay,
20
so
minutes away from Colfax, yeah.
not bad
But
because
my
over on
both my
Wolf
kids end
Road,
up.
like
Say it again.
I was just gonna say the west side of 49, that could be quite a drive.
Yeah, I actually live right downtown, so I'm literally the second home past the last business. So I'm on Main Street, and my wife and I love it. We love living downtown, and we have such a vibrant culture here that we love to invest in. And yeah, it's wonderful. But I also am very invested in Auburn still, because I grew up there and my parents still live there.
Right. And right, I live in North Auburn, so I'm kind of like I focus on North Placer County and South Nevada County. And I
Hmm.
merge it together.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
can you walk to Caroline's Coffee?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
that's our
Yep.
favorite coffee place. That's so good.
I can walk. I walk everywhere. We rarely, unless I'm doing work abroad, I get to walk to everything. It's really nice.
That is nice. I can walk to the mailbox where I live. That's about it.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, what really drives you to be a speaker and coach one-on-one, CEOs that are people that are extremely ambitious and probably intense personalities, and being a pastor's son. I
Mhm.
think, well, you obviously have the gift of, because he's a speaker, your dad, and is able to
Mhm.
command the audience. So you saw that, I'm sure, many, many times growing up. I'm assuming it's kind of natural for you. Like my dad was a photographer, so I had a natural eye to be a photographer myself for a while. Would you say
Mhm.
that that's how you kind of evolved just from the background you have? And I think you did mention that too, and when you spoke for Rotary.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that both my mom and my dad in the professions they led their most of their lives had a huge impression on me. My mom was a first grade teacher, or was. She's retired now, and my dad was a pastor, and so I got to be mentored by two people who really were in their professions because they had a calling to connect with people, to connect the community to something larger than just their individual selves, and that sort of became one of my highest values as well. And what I've noticed, and everything ebbs and flows, but what I've noticed in education specifically is that we often get very hung up on the data, um, the standardized scores, budgetary issues. I mean, these things are all extremely important. And I think at times what I've noticed is that we forget what's really important, which is connecting with people, connecting with kids. I have this strong belief that people don't really begin to engage unless you've created strong relationships with them, and you can start to build that trust. And so that's what drives me is to not necessarily teach leaders how to do that, but to remind leaders why that's so important. So.
Yeah, and listening to you a couple weeks ago, I'm a sweep rider volunteer for the Tevis Cup, the 100-mile race for
Yeah.
equestrian. So it's the Western states, and they've had all kinds of issues just because it's 9 groups of people that follow the riders, and you have to really be connected to each other. And it can get really intense when a horse is in distress or a human's in distress, and all of a sudden you're with this team and you practice the week before and you just find out what your section is that you're going, and you could be riding in the dark 12-inch wide trail with the American River, 600 feet below. So you really should know your partner, right? And
Yeah.
I mentioned to my husband, Nigel, who's a board member, about you and what you had to share. And I said, you guys really need to get together more and get to know each other. So we had a ride at Hidden Falls on Sunday, and there were 7 of us, and it went really well. We had all kinds of issues and had to work them out the radio, but we can't wait to do it again. And
That is
I
awesome.
thank you for that. And I'm gonna share this with the group and see what they have to say. And I think that'll continue on from. I mean, this race has been going on since 1955, and I don't know when the street riders started. I should know that, but I think that's pretty cool.
That is really, really cool. What you just did is what I try to teach leaders is to be intentional about the relationships that you build. And I think often we set those aside and just assume that they're gonna happen magically, and we focus on the work. But I honestly believe the work is really about what you just did on Sunday. You've got to be intentional about that. And when you begin to build a place where people feel safe, they feel noticed, they feel appreciated, they are much more willing to want to engage, and at sometimes have those courageous conversations that need to happen. I know when I was a teacher, if I was gonna get a kid to take a risk, they had to learn how to trust me. And really, kids aren't going to learn and grow until they're willing to be vulnerable and take risks. And it's the same way in an organization. We want our workers to really take risks and be vulnerable enough to do really good work. They got to feel like they have a trusting environment.
Absolutely. You just made me think of my diving instructor. When I was a kid, I was afraid to do a cutaway off the high dive. And I had to trust my coach, and I pulled it off and did really well.
Yeah.
So can you give me an example of a time that you were really surprised by someone that just kind of shocked you, that you weren't expecting them to share with you, or anything?
Yeah. Lots of examples.
But
I'm always impressed with people that I meet, and I think I'm most impressed with people's resilience. I was in a district, and I won't mention the district, but I was in a district where this brand new principal who had not really met his staff yet. He hadn't had time to do anything with the staff yet. He'd been hired late summer, and they had 8 administrators in a 5-year window.
wow.
So there was no trust at this school, and he asked me to come in and begin to build some foundational pieces with him. That very first day, he introduced himself to the staff, and one of the staff members stood up, raised their hand, or stood up, looked at everybody, and said, I'll put down $20. This guy doesn't last the year. And he said it right in front of this new administrator. The administrator responded, "Hey, I'll put 500 down that I last 5 years." And that was a great response. But then the next 4 hours, when we spent time, building relationships, going through a bunch of activities, and he was in the middle of that, doing everything that was asked of him by me and the rest of the group. you could just see the room change. They were, for the first time, this group was like, wow, maybe we do have someone who might stick around. Um, yeah, so I get surprised by those kind of things. I think I was surprised too that there are these organizations that are so dysfunctional, and they're not generally dysfunctional because they're not making money, or their kids are horrible in the school system, or the poverty is really high. I mean, they're generally dysfunctional because the staff just doesn't trust one another, and they don't trust their leaders.
That's pretty sad.
Yeah, but the beautiful thing for me is I get to go and see if I can make a difference. And really, what I'm just doing is I'm just trying to engage them enough so that they learn how to make their own a difference in their own organization.
Yeah. And that answers a question about something that people don't know about you and what you have to offer is that you can break those barriers down and and
Right,
and it's not you doing it, it's you just showing them how to do it.
right, right.
Well, what do you love most about what you do? What do your customers, your clients love most of it about it? Getting
Well,
besides
for
getting
me, what I love most is connecting with clients. I just absolutely love. I was in South Carolina a week or so ago, and I was with 250 elementary teachers, and their enthusiasm and just dedication to the work they're doing. In the midst of getting out of this pandemic, it was just so it was so encouraging for me. And I see that all over the United States. I honestly, what's most encouraging about my job is the media tells us we are so divided, and all I can see is people who really, really want to make the world a better place. I mean, you see that a lot in education, period. But I don't see these huge cultural divides being as bad as we often hear in the media. So that's one of the things. That's one of the gifts I get every day doing this work. I would say that most of my clients will remark that they're just so grateful to actually spend some time on these kind of issues, because so often their PD work, their professional development work, is not on trying to learn more about their colleagues, on trying to build trust with one another, on trying to create emotional connections. They're generally doing, they're doing things that are really important, but not necessarily spending time on creating and being intentional about cultivating a great culture.
Yeah, that's pretty positive. I do feel like a lot of people get a little obsessed with the news and believe too much into it. So that's good to hear.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I will just again reiterate, that my experience has been that people are are really doing some amazing things out there.
that's good to hear. That made me, this is kind of off topic, but I just thought about it with you because it's really hitting my industry hard as a realtor is AI. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what your thoughts are about it and the fact that you're bringing people together and some people view it as pulling them apart because AI can do so much instead of like all that creativeness that people have can just go out the window. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering how does it affect your business at all, or does it?
I haven't noticed any impact other than there's certainly some trepidation out there amongst educators specifically, that um, it's going to be more challenging for them, not only because AI can circumvent a lot of what they're teaching. Kids can get around things, things like that. But I think more than anything, all I'm trying to do is remind them how important people still are. And most educators, what I've noticed is most educators didn't get into education because they were really, really passionate about math, for example, or history. Like I was a history major, and I love history, but most educators got into education because they wanted to connect with kids, and they wanted to connect, um, with with something bigger than themselves. And so that's what I'm here to do. I'm just here to remind them that's their why, and let's go out and do that as effectively as we can. And yeah, there's always going to be something that's going to change our industry, change the way we look at things. I mean, when you and I were in school did look different. But what hasn't really changed is the relationships that the kids build with their teachers and with amongst themselves. And most kids, when they leave high school or elementary school, they don't necessarily remember what they learned specifically about, say, a math class, but they will certainly remember a connection they made with a teacher or with a fellow student. And so my job is just to facilitate that that why with them, remind them that that's what's most important.
Yeah, you make me feel like I'm really missing out because I don't have kids. I have horses, so it's like, oh, I need to figure out a way to get them more in my life. But horses, livestock guardian dogs, all these things on my property that I see as like danger, danger, accidents, and I'm just gonna have to let that go because I think I can't imagine my dogs being fearful of a kid, a teenager. I've had some come visit and they just start hugging my dogs and they love it. And so
Mhm.
it just reminded me that I need to have more friends with children to come over instead of having that fear mentality that they'll get hurt just because I live on a ranch.
I have been told so many times from people, how could you have worked with kids for that long and had that sort of fear that kids can be destructive, and if they get on your ranch, they might do something terrible with the dogs or the horses or things like that. And the reality is, most kids are absolutely amazing. They do things that are stupid at times, just as adults do. But most kids are. I love their zest for life and the fact that there's so much possibility ahead of them, and it makes you feel much younger too. And so part of the work I do is not just with the adults, although I like to work with the adults because I think they're the most important asset we have in education. And I think sometimes they get overlooked, but they need to be treated so well so every day they can face, the 35 kids in front of them and be their best selves. But I also really get a lot of energy from working with kids too. So I do workshops with kids as well, especially leadership groups. Yeah. So don't be afraid of those kiddos, and invite them on your ranch.
Okay,
They love animals.
Thanks to you, I'm going to change that attitude for sure. I promise. How about goals for you for the next 5 years? Are you going to keep doing what you're doing, or do you have something that you're working on down the road that you'd like to work more with kids, more with adults, or how about seniors? Anything with them?
I'm really open right now. I just got out of a meeting with a company that puts on conferences for really large companies. The one that I just was talking to was, oh man, what's the company? Edward Jones. And this particular company I was working with, they put on Edward Jones conferences, and I think there's like 60 of regional conferences a year. Anyway, the reason I was meeting with these guys was I'm starting to branch out a little bit more and work with companies rather than just schools, so that they can begin to also understand how important it is to connect with one another. So I've been hired to do some keynotes and then some workshops at these conferences. So that's kind of where I see my work going. I would say the thing I like the most, however, is coaching and having that one-on-one time with an administrator. And you'd be surprised, it is often not about a lot of my coaching has nothing to do with school. It has more to do with a lot of them have what I would probably call imposter syndrome. They just don't think they're enough. And so coaching them to understand that they are enough, and they're a guide. They're not the hero of the organization. They're just a guide, and they're guiding these heroes to their best selves. Trying to get that to flip with them psychologically is something I really enjoy doing. I think so often we get into leadership roles and we think we have to know it all. When I became a parent, I didn't know how to be a parent. I just had to be the best guide for my kids I could be. And that's the same when I became a principal. I didn't really know how to be a principal. I just had to be the best guide I could for, the heroes who are teaching the kids and the parents who are sending their kids to us to entrust us. So that's what I probably enjoy the most is the coaching.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see you being really good at it.
Oh, thank you.
So when you were growing up, I'm going to go back to where we live and
Mm-hmm.
in Placer County, you probably had, and being from Minnesota, I will say as a photographer, I did a lot of family portraits, and the majority of them were people from Minnesota, Illinois, Michigan, all these Midwestern states where I mean, the weather's terrible a lot of the time, and
Mm-hmm.
you're in your house and you want to see your family together. So I did a lot of big family portraits on canvas, and then I come to California and everyone's like, "We're outside, we don't care." So different. But I mean, you're saying you travel all over the United States, and people do feel more connected than a lot of us feel. And there are so many variances within the United States. But here you are raising kids in Grass Valley, South County of Nevada County. And what is it that you love most? I mean, you told me you're downtown, you get to walk everywhere. I think you're a hardcore sportsman or you're an athlete. You know, I go out and do a lot of hiking, skiing, perhaps. I'm just guessing because you're right there.
I honestly, Lori, I feel like we live in one of the greatest areas in the entire world because I'm, less than 2 hours from the ocean. I'm less than 45 minutes to Lake Tahoe. I am, I can access trails within 5 minutes and be out in the middle of the forest. Can snowboard, at 5 different resorts within an hour. The lakes and the rivers. And I mean, we just live in one of the most amazing areas. And yeah, I just feel I am in the place that I want to live the rest of my life. And I've always felt that way when we moved to Auburn. I just thought this was such an amazing place to be. And I just moved up a little bit higher in the foothills from Auburn. I'm not, to be frank with you, I didn't have any reasoning for it other than that's where my wife and I settled. Well, she's a Grass Valley teacher, so that's where we settled. But this whole foothill region, I just have always loved, and I just feel really fortunate to be here. There are obviously issues, and we are certainly dealing with those issues like fire insurance and all of those kind of things
Yeah,
that everyone's dealing with. But
right.
I feel super blessed to live here, and I do, like you said, I'm a sportsman. I do love to be on the trails. I love to bike. My wife and I love to paddleboard, kayak. My kids are big outdoor enthusiasts. They both climb. My son's an avid surfer. They've taken on this sort of lifestyle because we are afforded that up here. We're super privileged to live in this area.
Yes, we are. You're right. And the fire insurance is a hassle, and a lot of people just deal with it and learn how. I mean, I think if you don't have a lot of animals, it's not that hard to evacuate. Just do it. I mean, I have 5 equines, so I'm always wondering how I'm going to pull
Wow.
it off. But you're right. It's totally worth it. The taxes, the politics, or whatever people complain about with the state, it's worth it because of it's paradise. In fact, and you
Yeah.
in the foothills is like that's my new YouTube channel is exploring the foothills because I can't just pigeonhole Auburn because there's Loomis, Penryn, Newcastle close by, and then of course Grass Valley, Colfax, Weimar. You know, we're
Mhm.
just surrounded by so many cool little towns. And that
Yeah, we
being
really
said,
are.
so since you're a water person too, what's your favorite lake to go to?
Well, my wife and I had a boat slipped at Rollins Lake for many, many years when our kids were growing up. We no longer, but we do go out and kayak and um, paddleboard there. We also love Scotts Flat Lake. We're there a lot. And then we do have a place up in Truckee, so we go to Lake Tahoe a lot. And Lake Tahoe by far is my favorite lake. I just, I have so many memories there since I was a child, and I've been fortunate enough to have friends who have places up there as well. And so visiting there, I was just there this weekend. I'm there
Yeah,
all the time. I love,
I
love,
like
love,
Donner
love
Lake a
that
lot.
area. Yeah, Donner Lake is wonderful too. And then the other area that my wife and I in the last 10 years have spent a lot of time backpacking is the Plumas National Forest, which is just
Yeah.
phenomenal. And there's just not a lot of people out there, and there are lakes everywhere. And we love to go to Wade's, Jameson Rock, Sardine. There's just so many beautiful Little Deer. There's just so many beautiful lakes up there to go and get away. And
Yeah.
yeah, very lucky.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And
Yeah.
so besides restaurants that you get to walk to in Grass Valley, do you have a favorite restaurant in Auburn that you like? Since I switched from sports to food.
Yeah.
My two favorite
Well, I
things.
will. It'll depend on what I'm looking for, but because I'm an Auburnite and I've been there since I was 9, Taco Tree is the place I frequent the most, and I am a
No.
big diehard Taco Tree fan. But I would say for real dining, and no offense to Taco Tree for real dining, but for real dining, I love Trey Pozzi. I love Monkey Cat. We were huge Pasquale Tea fans growing up, and I'm so happy to see Pasquale's back, and hopefully we'll frequent that again. Yeah, so those are some of my favorite places for sure.
Okay, well, I was going to ask you about significant changes you've seen, and there's one. Piscales is back.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so we just have a few more minutes. Anything that I know you sent me your website, so I'll share that. Is that the best way to reach out to you if someone wants to hire you for one-on-one coaching or to help them with their business?
Yeah, either through my site or through the other site I sent you, which is Learning for Living.
Mhm.
And that's where the majority of my work comes from, because they're a national organization, but certainly locally, Paul Lundberg Consulting is a great place to connect with me for sure.
Okay, and you have social media too that you can share with me besides like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, or X.
Yeah, so we do, and we put out a lot of podcasts, so I can share our podcast website
Okay,
with you. And yep,
that would be
and we
great.
do have a Facebook. We have a Facebook site as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you can share? Like maybe the highest high you've ever had in your entire career. We can end with that.
The highest I've ever had, highest, like, what did you say?
The highest high in
Okay.
maybe in life, not necessarily work wise, career wise, but in your life.
Well, having kids was my highest by far. I thought I used to be that my highest was my wife, obviously, and she's going to be with me the rest of my life. But when the two of us had kids, it was amazing. It's an amazing gift. And then I would say professionally, having both of them graduate from Colfax High School while I was principal was an incredible gift. And then just continue to watch them grow has been amazing. My daughter is a sophomore or junior at Whitman University up in Washington. My son graduated from San Diego State and is now a fireman. And the two of them, they're just blessings for us all the time. We're so lucky. And I'm also so lucky because both my mother and father-in-law and my mom and dad are still alive, and they both live in Auburn, and we see them constantly. Family is really important. So that's probably my highest. I also have 9 buddies that I grew up with since around 4th grade, and we all graduated from Placer together. Most of us went to college together. The 9 of us get together twice a year for a hunting trip, and then just for a general gathering. And our families are really close. The kids are all really close. The wives are really close. And that's we're going on a 45-year friendship now. So I've been so lucky to live in this area and meet such amazing people. So that's
Definitely,
my
that's
high.
pretty
Definitely,
rare.
it's the people. It's the people that I've met. I mean, we're just really lucky. There's just so much. There's so many wonderful people up here. And when I was at Rotary and got a chance to meet you and meet these amazing human beings who are volunteering their time to make Auburn a better place. Yeah. And what a great, I mean, you guys, you're huge, you're a big organization. You do so much amazing work for the community. Yeah, we're just lucky.
Yeah, we're pretty close to eradicating polio. That's a huge one. And then I love hearing all the Interact students. Maybe I'll sponsor a foreign student. And that would be fun. Take them all
That
over
is
the place. I'll think about
absolutely,
that. And I
Yes,
remember you
yes,
talking about your 9 friends going the PCT trail because I knew that you were an athlete, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, you were hiking out there with them. That's pretty cool. Yeah,
yes. The PCT is one of my goals. I want to do the entire PCT
the
eventually.
entire PCT. I'll just
Yeah,
ride parts of it and wave at you from my horse, okay? From
that's perfect.
Ariel. I love
Yes,
that part.
yes. You'll
Okay.
have to connect with my dad, by the way, because we also grew up with horses, and he was on search and rescue, and he absolutely loves horses as well.
Oh, totally. Big. Well, I picked up on that when I saw his Spurs for our
Yes,
Western
right.
Wear Day. I'm like, okay, I really need to talk to Bruce.
Yes,
And he's
definitely.
told me he had to buy them for something that he had to do. So I'm like, all right,
For
we're
search and that's he had those for search and rescue, actually.
okay.
Yeah. Yep.
That's awesome. He
Yeah.
should be a sweep writer. Well, thanks again for your time. And I just want to remind everybody that I am a realtor, Coldwell Banker. And if you are looking to buy or sell, I'm happy to help you, or you want a market report, learn the value of your home. And then, of course, I really like people to know up front what their insurance is. So if you want to move here, we got to talk about Cal Fair Plan, and because that's a given for where Paul and I live, right?
Yeah.
On top of your homeowner's insurance. So you got to plan that with your lender if you're not paying all cash. So not fun, but obviously with our conversation, it's worth it.
Yes.
Yes. And thanks again.
Thank you. We'll
You're
see you,
right.
Lori.
You bet. I'm going to